We trust our roommates to share our space and lives. But what happens when that trust turns to terror? Tonight, discover 3 chilling true stories where living with someone became a nightmare. These are tales of fear, obsession, and hidden dangers that will make you question who you really share your home with. 1. The Man in the Walls. Hannah, a graduate student, was thrilled to find an affordable apartment in an old but charming building near her university. Her new roommate, Claire, seemed nice enough, quiet, studious, and rarely home. At first, everything was perfect. But after a few weeks, Hannah began to notice strange things around the apartment. It started with small, seemingly harmless incidents like lights flickering, doors creaking open on their own, and objects being slightly moved. One night, Hannah was up late studying when she heard a faint tapping sound coming from inside the walls of her bedroom. She assumed it was just the old pipes, or maybe even a rodent. But the tapping grew louder and more persistent over the next few nights, always around the same time, -3 a.m. Then it escalated. She began hearing whispers, unintelligible but unmistakably human, coming from behind the walls. Hannah tried to brush it off as her imagination, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her unease grew when she noticed that Claire was acting increasingly strange. She would disappear for days without explanation, and when she was home, she spent hours locked in her room, murmuring to herself. One evening, Hannah returned home early from class to find Claire in the kitchen, staring blankly at the wall, as if in a trance. Hannah asked if she was okay, but Claire didn't respond. Instead, she slowly turned her head toward Hannah, her eyes wide with terror, and whispered, "He's in the walls." Hannah's blood ran cold. That night, she decided to investigate. She waited until Claire was asleep, and then began searching the apartment for any sign of someone else living there. When she reached the kitchen, she noticed something odd about one of the cabinets. It was slightly ajar, with scratch marks around the edges, as if someone had been opening and closing it frequently. She pulled the cabinet open, revealing a narrow crawl space hidden behind it. Heart pounding, Hannah grabbed a flashlight and squeezed through the opening. The crawl space was dark and smelled of dampness and decay. As she crawled deeper, she saw something that made her stomach churn: a small makeshift bed, with blankets and pillows tucked into the corner. There were also old food wrappers, empty bottles, and a tattered notebook. Hannah flipped through the notebook, her hands shaking. It was filled with disturbing sketches of eyes, faces twisted in agony, and scribbled notes detailing her daily activities. The most recent entry sent chills down her spine. "She's getting closer. I need to silence her before she finds me." Suddenly, Hannah heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, but there was no one there. Panicking, she scrambled out of the crawl space and ran to wake Claire. But when she burst into Claire's room, she found it empty, completely cleared out, as if no one had ever lived there. Terrified, Hannah called the police. When they arrived, they discovered that Claire was not who she seemed. She was a former psychiatric patient who had escaped from a nearby institution years ago. But even more horrifying was what the police found in the crawl space: a man, emaciated and half-mad, who had been living there for months. He had been using the walls to move around the apartment, spying on both women. The notebook was his, and he had been planning to kill Hannah before she discovered him. Hannah moved out immediately, but the trauma of that night haunted her for years. 2. The Poisonous Roommate. In the bustling heart of New York City, Jack, a young professional in his mid-20s, thought he had hit the jackpot when he found a spacious apartment with rent well below the market rate. The catch? He had to share it with 3 roommates, all of whom seemed nice enough during the initial meeting. The apartment was modern, well kept, and located in a lively neighborhood, ticking all the right boxes for Jack. Among his new roommates was Alex, a slightly older man in his early 30s. Alex was neat, soft-spoken, and had a peculiar obsession with cleanliness, especially in the kitchen. He was always wiping down counters, organizing the pantry, and scrubbing the floors, sometimes even late at night. While Jack appreciated the cleanliness, he also found Alex's behavior a bit over the top. But everyone has their quirks, right? A few months in, Jack began feeling unwell. It started with mild headaches that he attributed to stress from work. But soon, the symptoms escalated: persistent nausea, dizziness, and a fatigue that left him exhausted no matter how much sleep he got. Jack wasn't the only one. His other two roommates, Sarah and Tom, mentioned they were also feeling under the weather. They all joked about the possibility of a flu going around, but as weeks passed, none of them got better. One night, after a particularly grueling day at work, Jack was too tired to clean up after making dinner. He left his dirty dishes in the sink, planning to deal with them in the morning. Around 2 a.m., he woke up to a faint sound coming from the kitchen, clinking of dishes, followed by a soft, repetitive spraying noise. Curious and a little unnerved, Jack quietly got out of bed and crept towards the kitchen. There, under the dim light of the kitchen, he saw Alex standing over the sink, methodically cleaning the dishes Jack had left out. But something was off. Alex was wearing rubber gloves and spraying the dishes with a small, unmarked bottle before carefully rinsing them off. Jack stood frozen, watching as Alex repeated the process with a disturbing level of focus and precision. Then, to Jack's horror, he saw Alex fill a glass with water and add a few drops from the same bottle before placing it on the counter. Jack's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. The headaches, the nausea couldn't be a coincidence. Realizing he might be witnessing something sinister, Jack quietly backed away and returned to his room, his heart pounding. The next morning, while Alex was out, Jack discreetly took the glass of water and the bottle to a lab for testing, desperate to know what was in them. The results confirmed his worst fears. The liquid in the bottle was a slow-acting poison, capable of causing severe symptoms over time. Jack was horrified. How long had Alex been doing this? And why? He immediately went to the police, handing over the evidence. They launched an investigation, uncovering a chilling truth: Alex had a history of untreated mental illness, leading to paranoid delusions. He believed his roommates were plotting against him, and in his twisted mind, poisoning them was the only way to protect himself. Alex was arrested and committed to a psychiatric facility, but the damage had been done. Jack and his roommates had suffered long-term health effects from the poisoning, and the psychological trauma was even more profound. The apartment, once a place of comfort, had become a source of nightmares. Jack couldn't bear to stay in the city any longer and moved away, haunted by the thought that someone he lived with, someone he shared meals and conversations with, had been slowly killing him. 3. The obsessed roommate. Megan had always been a social butterfly, surrounded by friends and never too far from someone she could call her best friend. When she and her closest friend from high school, Emily, both got accepted into the same college, it seemed like a dream come true. They would be living together, studying together, and continuing the inseparable bond they had built over the years. At first, living together was everything they had imagined. They attended classes together, joined the same clubs, and had movie nights almost every weekend. But as the months went by, Megan started to notice subtle changes in Emily's behavior. It began with small, seemingly harmless acts. Emily would insist on knowing where Megan was at all times, who she was with, and what they talked about. Megan shrugged it off, thinking Emily was just being protective. After all, they were best friends. However, Emily's need for control grew more intense. She started getting upset if Megan made plans without her, even if it was just a quick coffee with a classmate. Emily would sulk, give Megan the silent treatment, and then bombard her with messages asking why she didn't invite her. Megan tried to include Emily in everything, but it became exhausting. The more Megan tried to maintain a healthy balance in her friendships, the more possessive Emily became. One evening, after a particularly grueling study session with a group from her psychology class, Megan came home to find Emily waiting for her in the living room. The lights were off, and Emily was sitting in the dark, her eyes fixed on the door as Megan entered. Megan barely had time to react before Emily launched into a tirade, accusing her of neglecting their friendship, of lying, and of not caring about her anymore. Megan was taken aback by the intensity of Emily's anger but tried to calm her down, insisting that she still cared deeply for her. Emily wasn't convinced and stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. Disturbed by Emily's outburst, Megan decided to give her some space, hoping things would blow over. But that night, Megan discovered something that would change everything. As she was about to plug in her phone to charge, she realized it was missing. She searched everywhere, eventually finding it hidden under Emily's bed. When she unlocked it, her blood ran cold. Emily had gone through all of her messages, deleted contacts, and even blocked several of Megan's friends. Worse, there were dozens of unsent messages to Megan's family and friends, filled with lies and slander. Terrified and unsure of what Emily might do next, Megan began distancing herself, spending more time out of the apartment and less time with Emily. This only made things worse. Emily became increasingly erratic, leaving Megan disturbing notes under her door, notes filled with rambling messages that oscillated between desperate pleas for forgiveness and chilling threats. "You can't leave me. We're meant to be together forever. If you abandon me, you'll regret it." The notes grew more unhinged with each passing day, and Megan began to fear for her safety. The situation reached its terrifying climax one night when Megan woke up to a strange feeling, an overwhelming sense of being watched. Her eyes snapped open, and she saw Emily standing at the foot of her bed, bathed in the pale light of the moon filtering through the window. In her hand, Emily clutched a pair of scissors, her knuckles white with the intensity of her grip. She was muttering to herself, her eyes wide and unfocused. Megan lay perfectly still, her heart racing, pretending to be asleep as Emily leaned closer, her whispers becoming more frantic. Megan's mind raced with fear. What if Emily decided to use those scissors? What if this was the moment her best friend's obsession turned deadly? After what felt like an eternity, Emily finally backed away and left the room, closing the door quietly behind her. Megan didn't sleep a wink that night, her mind filled with images of what could have happened. The next morning, Megan knew she had to get out. She packed her things while Emily was out and moved in with another friend across campus, leaving no forwarding address. Megan blocked Emily on all social media and changed her phone number, hoping to put as much distance as possible between them. But Emily didn't give up. She began stalking Megan, showing up at her classes, sending threatening messages through mutual friends, and even vandalizing Megan's new apartment door with chilling messages. Megan finally had to involve the authorities, obtaining a restraining order against Emily. Emily's family intervened, eventually forcing her to move out of state and seek psychiatric help. But the ordeal left Megan shaken. The friendship she had cherished for so many years had twisted into something dark and dangerous, and it took her a long time to trust anyone again. Even years later, Megan would occasionally receive anonymous messages and packages, reminders of a friendship that had turned into a living nightmare.